They call this security, please. Hold tight. I'll handle it.
The UNSC lost this war months ago. Your people are broken, scattered, hunted, defeated by me.
20 years ago, at the launch of the original Xbox, we saw a new mascot come into the fray that's almost as popular as Mario. His name is Master Chief, and the game is Halo. Halo was like a colossal event every time a new game came out, both during the original Xbox era and during the Xbox 360 era. Unfortunately, Halo has not been as popular since Halo Reach just came out. But now we're in a new console generation, and after an entire year delay to get the game's visuals and the campaign story up and running to the best it can possibly be, Halo Infinite is finally here. Well, at least the campaign is finally here. The multiplayer portion of the game actually came out on the 20th anniversary of Halo in the original Xbox, November 15th, 2021. And we're going to talk about more of the multiplayer later because I really want to start with the campaign first. And let me just say, based on the gameplay alone, Halo is back. They finally went back to the original gameplay that made Halo good. For one, Sprint is still in the game, but honestly, Sprint doesn't feel bad in this game. It has been a very controversial topic within the Halo community on whether or not Sprint should or shouldn't be in Halo. My personal take is you don't really need Sprint, you could just increase the walking speed of the game, but the walking speed of Halo Infinite feels fine enough to where I don't really need to use Sprint half the time. However, Sprint can help you get out of a few dicey situations, and it adds the ability to where you can slide on the ground. And to me, that feels like a modern progression of a classic Halo game, and I'm totally okay with those gameplay features. One of the newest things that you get by default in the campaign is a grappling hook. The grappling hook is my favorite new addition in any modern Halo game. It works great in the multiplayer, but in the campaign, it just makes the game so much more fun. While walking around the Zeta Halo ring, there's a bunch of higher terrain that you can go and climb on in this game. With using the grappling hook, you can use it to swing around the map like you're Spider-Man in certain areas, or if you're in a firefight with the Banish, you can easily just point at the ground and just easily zip your way out of a dicey situation. The other abilities that you would find within the multiplayer are also available within the campaign, such as the threat sensor, the drop wall, and the thruster. I'm not gonna lie to you, the only things that are worth upgrading within this game are the grapple shot and the shield core. Every other item in the game kind of felt useless. The threat sensor I've only used in 2 boss fights, and the drop wall and thruster I didn't even use at all. To me, if you're gonna go after the bare minimum to complete this game, I would highly just recommend upgrading the grapple shot and the shield core. When you first start off with the campaign, it does feel like familiar territory. There's a linear corridor and hallways on a base, you're shooting down enemies, and you're going to the next area of the game. However, after beating the first boss and going right into the third mission of the game, you step your foot into a larger world on the Zeta Halo ring, and you see the area is massive. At least it did feel somewhat massive at first. This game isn't as connected of an open world like a Far Cry game or a Horizon Zero Dawn or a Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. It is an open world game to some extent, but it's not as connected as those games previously stated. After the first area of the third mission, you then start to realize how different this campaign is this time around. On top of the main campaign missions, you can go to other FOB bases, which allow you to call in more troops to help you out within certain parts of the map. It allows you to call in certain vehicles at any time, and allows you to call in certain weapons. The types of weapons and vehicles depend on how much valor you gain in the game, which is based off your main mission completions as well as doing some of the side missions in this game, such as saving other UNSC troops and going and taking down high-value targets. During my playthrough, I only took down about 1 high-value target, but you are rewarded with a more powerful weapon when you do that you can access at the FOB base at any time. And I highly recommend trying to go and take these out in between campaign missions, because on the harder difficulties, you're going to need more of the powerful weapons on you, especially when you get to certain boss fights in this game. Boss fights are kind of cool in Halo, in theory, but when you're playing the actual boss fights, they kind of feel like an afterthought. Some of them are fun to take down, but they're not really engaging as a game like Returnal, for example. They're just there to kind of fill out certain parts of the story. I played this game on the heroic difficulty like I do every other Halo game because I feel like it's the best balance. And just like the classic Halo games, it's the way Halo's meant to be played. Some of these boss fights just felt like bullet sponges half the time, especially the adjuncted resolution fights and the Torvaris and the Hyperius boss fights. They just felt like giant bullet sponges, and it made it very frustrating to fight these battles. Final boss in particular, while the actual boss itself wasn't exactly hard, the fight around the boss fight was ridiculous. I got my ass handed to me probably over 60 times before I beat the game, but after beating the game I felt satisfied, and I immediately just wanted to go and complete the rest of the side missions. After this review, I'm probably still going to be going through and trying to 100% this game on heroic, and eventually I want to get started on a legendary playthrough, either solo or when co-op eventually comes out. And yes, you heard me correctly, when co-op eventually comes out, because unfortunately Halo Infinite did not have enough time to implement co-op before the game's release. And to me, I find that very disappointing. It's no secret that this game went through a lot of development trouble and literally had to be delayed an entire year just because the visuals were not on par for Microsoft's next generation console. But when you release this campaign without a mission select and without co-op, it is extremely disappointing that we're not getting a complete package at launch. Yes, we're going to get other campaign content down the road. Yes, they're going to patch in mission select. And yes, we're eventually going to get co-op as well. But the fact that Halo's been around for 20 years and literally is iconic for having co-op within its campaign, it should have been there at launch, and I have to take a point off of that. The visuals in this game look pretty damn good. I started off playing the campaign on the Series S, and I was actually really surprised. The game was running on performance mode at 60 frames per second at 1080p. However, the quality mode does drop down to 30 frames per second. But when you go to the Series X version, holy crap, this game looks really good. I was playing this game on my Sony X90J with HDR on at 4K quality mode, and the game was running buttery smooth at 60 FPS. When you drop it down to performance mode, it runs at, I believe, 120 frames per second. And this game just looked fantastic on these next generation consoles. As for the main campaign itself, I felt the story to be a little bit dry but serviceable. When you get certain pieces of equipment, you oftentimes see a dead Spartan right next to the piece of equipment. And oftentimes the weapon, which is the new AI in this game, will tell you background story on how the Spartan ended up dying. And honestly, I felt like it would have been a better idea to show us this rather than tell us. Show us how the Spartans die in order to get a better understanding of how much of a menace the upcoming boss is going to be. I absolutely enjoyed the main characters in this game. Master Chief has a lot of dialogue in this game, but he also is shown to be very stoic, while also kind of getting more in touch with his human side, kind of what Halo 4 and Halo 5 was supposed to do within this new trilogy. Echo 216, the pilot that ends up saving Master Chief, who is also shown in many of the trailers and at the beginning of this campaign, is a very fun character to watch. He is very timid, but you also see him grow, and his dynamic with Chief is very entertaining to watch. But by far my favorite character in this game is the new AI that is called The Weapon. And this character is absolutely adorable. She's funny. Just hearing her and Chief banter back and forth reminds me of the original relationship between Cortana and Master Chief. And honestly, I kind of like this relationship between The Weapon and Master Chief a little bit more than I did with Cortana and Chief in the older games. It was a very great performance, and I absolutely love the banter that went back and forth. Other than that, I really did not care for the villains in this campaign. I kind of really wish we got to actually fight Atriox in this game. Instead, we see a cutscene of Chief and Atriox duking it out, and hopefully we do see more DLC content come through for the campaign, because most of the story is either within the main missions themselves or by going around and finding UNSC audio logs as well as Banish audio logs. And to me, it's kind of a cheap way to pad out the main game while also providing bits and pieces of story. I really don't like it when games do that. If you're going to present me with a single player experience, show me the story. Don't tell me the story through the audio logs or outside content. My main problems with the open world in this game is the amount of uphill terrain that's going on, which is great for using things like the grappling hook and being able to sprint to your next location. But when you have vehicles at your disposal at the FOB bases, Everything that's on wheels is basically worthless if you have to go uphill to go to your next objective. So honestly, the best vehicles in this game are the aircraft vehicles, because half the time I got into a mongoose or a warthog, I would immediately have to get out of the vehicle just because I cannot get the car up the hill. The only time where I find a vehicle to be very useful is whether a tank is provided to me somewhere within the main mission, or if I'm going off and doing a high valuable target mission, I can just load all the Marines up, give them all rocket launchers, load them in the back of the Razorback Warthog, and just get busy. Otherwise, I found the vehicles to be absolutely worthless when going around in the open world. That's not to say that they're not fun to use, but if you're going to give me this giant sandbox, just think about the level design before you give us these options and vehicles. Despite the bare bones stories, and despite some of the side issues that come with making this game into an open world game, Halo Infinite was fun to play. It's a good game, but it's not a great game. Sure, we're probably going to see more of the story expanded in future DLC content, and maybe they'll even add more stuff going into the open world, and I am damn well sure going to play this game on co-op when it comes out. But some of these things that are missing at launch put a huge detriment on playing the single player, at least in terms when it comes to future replays of this game. It's not a bad campaign. It's definitely the best 343 campaign, but it still does not go near the original trilogy in my opinion. I've already talked enough about the multiplayer in my previous impressions video, but I will say one of the things that I absolutely love about Infinite is the multiplayer. This is one of the best multiplayers since Halo 3, in my opinion, when looking at the franchise within itself. Whether I'm playing with a bunch of buddies within the Discords that I'm in, or some of my real life friends through Xbox Live, or whether I just want to solo queue myself to go and play the game on my own, I'm having a blast, and whenever I get on the game, I don't want to get off. That's how good this multiplayer is, and I miss that multiplayer that encourages me to grind. And when I say grind, the Battle Pass is a bit of a grind. I paid $10 to get into the Battle Pass because I know I'm going to be playing this game for a while. I really wish they had a progression system that awards players more XP for doing well in a match and being in a winning position. 343 is obviously still going to be updating and supporting this game with future events such as Winter Contingency, as well as bringing back the Turnrai event. Halo Infinite overall is one of my favorite multiplayer games out on the market currently. The campaign is good, but it's not great. But everything else, especially the gameplay, is getting me hooked, and I'm happy to say that Halo is finally back. I'm still going to be playing Halo Master Chief Collection from time to time, as it is one of my most played games that I do stream on Twitch, but Halo Infinite is definitely going to be taking up a good portion of my time going forward within the next 10 years. I don't really want to put a rating on this game yet, especially since this game is going to have more content well into the future, but if I had to rate the campaign on its own, it'd be a 7 out of 10. But the multiplayer altogether, bringing it into a complete package, I can confidently say that Halo Infinite for me gets an 8 out of 10. After making the Doom Eternal Ancient Gods DLC review, I definitely wanted to do more reviews on this channel. Let me know down below if you want to see more of these style videos, and I'll keep on trying to make them as time goes on. My goal for 2022 is to put out more produced content on YouTube, as well as doing the occasional stream on Twitch. And if you haven't followed me on Twitch, you can follow me on Twitch at Melodic Punk. You can follow me on Twitter at The Melodic Punk, and you can subscribe here for more content. Thank you all and have a good night.